doctor. Making the decision to breast or bottle feed your baby is a very personal one and likely to elicit strong opinions from friends and family. I would add my voice to many other medical authorities who strongly recommend that breast is best. But that's easy for me to say because I don't have to get up 5 times a night and have my boobs proffered and plucked. Breastfeeding can be very challenging, which is why I've asked Megan and Kath to come in and join us. They've been there, they've authored a book on feeding sense, and they're going to help us make some sense of feeding. So if you're a feeding mom, first take a look at this. I think you can relate.
I tried to breastfeed her for about 6 weeks. I found it a very emotional and a very traumatic experience.
It was difficult. Everything about it was difficult for me. I found it really hard to enjoy it because the positioning was difficult. The latching was difficult, it was sore.
I found it easy, I really did.
It was an awesome experience and it just came very naturally and the milk just began to flow.
As a mom, you just think it's something that's going to come so naturally, and it really didn't to me. It was very, very hard.
Breastfeeding was part of my journey of becoming a mother.
You thoroughly believe as a first-time mom that your child is going to have every illness and that it's going to die if it's not breastfed.
Kath, is there a difference between breastfed babies and bottle-fed babies?
I think in the initial days, the biggest difference you notice is their growth. The bottle-fed babies generally regain their birth weight quite quickly, and the breastfed babies take a lot longer, which often causes the new mom to panic because everything is about weight and regaining birth weight in the beginning.
So why would mothers not breastfeed? What are the challenges to breastfeed?
I think one of the main challenges, again, for the first-time mom especially, is just not knowing how many mils your baby's had. You know, breasts don't come with mils on it like bottles do.
Yeah. And they're not transparent, which would be great if they were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well.
So it's just that insecurity. You've got to learn so many signals from your new baby, what their cries are for, and you're never sure, is it a hunger cry? And when you breastfeed in, that unsureness is heightened.
Tricky question this, Kath. Demand feed or routine feed?
In the beginning, to establish your breast milk, you definitely need to demand feed. And actually, I would take it a step further. If you've chosen to bottle feed or you're not able to bottle feed for numerous reasons, even demand feed in your bottle-fed baby is the healthier way to do it, because then you learn the signals of when they're hungry and when they're not.
Wow. Meg, there's also a difference between bottle-fed and breastfed babies when it comes to sleep behaviors, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are 2 core reasons why a breastfed baby generally doesn't sleep quite as well as a bottle-fed baby. The first is that breast milk is much more easily digested, and so it digests quickly, so the baby's ready for a feed a little bit sooner, which can be very frustrating when you're a new mom. You're wanting that long stretch of sleep, but unfortunately you end up with a slightly shorter one with your breastfed baby. But the second thing is, and this is certainly for the older baby, is that breastfeeding brings an enormous amount of comfort. So the breastfeeding baby has a higher tendency to end up waking up at night for comfort feeds as opposed to the bottle-fed baby. Yeah. So breastfed babies may sleep slightly worse than bottle-fed babies, but there certainly isn't a reason to give up breastfeeding, obviously.
Can you arrange your sleep routines around feeding routines, or how would you work that out?
Yeah, I mean, establishing a routine in the early days is certainly something that parents start to yearn for. You just want a little bit of order to your days, and you don't know where to start. Do we start with slotting our babies into a rigid sleep, feed, sleep routine, or are we able to just do a sleep routine, or can we actually go towards a feeding routine? And as Kath mentioned, we want to demand feed babies early on. It's important because that's how we establish breast milk supply. So I don't encourage a feeding routine early on. But a sleep routine is something that you can start to establish from quite soon after the baby's born, from about 2 weeks onwards. And in baby sense and in feeding sense and sleep sense, we talk about the awake time. So that's how long your baby's awake before they need to go back to sleep. If you follow awake times, you can establish a sleep routine, and then a feeding routine comes a little bit later.
Megan, what way can we feed our babies to assist them in developing healthy sleep routines?
Well, feeding is important when it comes to sleep. So it's important that your baby is adequately fed. So feeding them on demand would be an important thing. Not feeding your baby to sleep is another important thing. As soon as you get into the habit of always feeding your baby to sleep, they end up in habits. Another very important thing that a lot of mums do is they start to wake their babies up in the middle of the night to try and get in as much nutrition so that they don't have to wake up at kind of 2 o'clock in the morning. That we call a dream feed. And I don't like dream feeds. I think it's better to allow babies to actually establish their own sleep routines. So feed them well when you put them to bed in the evening. As Kath said, maybe add in a little bit of a top-up and allow your baby to sleep through the night until such time as they wake up. And then also bear in mind that young babies are going to wake up at night. That's part of the deal.
No getting around that, hey?
No getting
you
around.
wanted to be a parent. So what trumps what? Sleep routines or feeding?
You really can't separate them. I mean, sleep and feeding are completely interlinked. If a baby hasn't slept well, they're unlikely to feed well because they can be fractious and overstimulated. And if a baby hasn't fed well, they're also not going to sleep well. So they go hand in hand. The important thing is not to try and push them into routines too early and to allow the baby to feed well and then fall into a sleep routine.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Kath. Fascinating insights. And you'll get, of course, more information on our website at hellodoctor.com. On a somewhat complete tangent, Chinese researchers have utilized cloning technology to successfully introduce human genes into hundreds of dairy cows to produce milk with the same properties as human breast milk. Not sure I'd want my child feeding off Franken cows, not to mention what it'll do to the ever-increasing occurrence of cow milk allergies in kids.